I was 16 years old when I was sitting in a hospital bed and the doctor telling me, Marina, you have type 1 diabetes. And 25 years later, I've learned a lot about food and nutrition, unfortunately, the hard way. And in today's episode, I'm sharing 6 lessons learned that diabetes has taught me about health, about food, nutrition, balance. And these lessons have really changed the way I see life, the way I see food, and the way I teach about nutrition. And they might even change the way you feed your family, especially if you're raising a child with type 1 diabetes, or if you have a family member that lives with diabetes. This one is going to be for you. Welcome to the Messy Bite Podcast. Welcome back to the Messy Bite Podcast, where feeding kids gets real, a little chaotic, but you will always find joy in the menu. I'm Marina Chaparro, Pediatric Registered Dietitian, mom of 2, and if you don't know, fellow type 1 warrior. So today is going to be a very special episode for me because every November 14th actually marks World Diabetes Day, and I like to do a reflection. I can't believe it's been 25 years that I've been living with this, that I've been embracing diabetes. But I've learned a lot, and I don't think I've always felt the same. So in today's episode, I'm going to be sharing some of my lessons learned the hard way that might even change the way either you see food, you talk about food, or especially if you have a child or if you know somebody that was recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. This is going to be for them. And this year marks 5 years since I wrote this baby, Pregnancy and Diabetes. I actually wrote it when I was pregnant with my second daughter. And I can just tell you that becoming pregnant was probably one of the hardest things that I ever did mentally, emotionally with my diabetes. But it just comes to show you that diabetes could be a source of purpose, inspiration, and it's not going to define us or limit us. So I hope this episode brings you inspiration. You learn a lot from my mistakes, and it even might change the way you either feed your family, you think about food and joy and balance. And especially if you have a child with type 1, or if you know somebody that was recently diagnosed, this is going to be an episode that could give them comfort, inspiration, and letting them know that it's okay and we got this. All right, so lesson number 1. Food is not the enemy. I think when I was first diagnosed, granted, I was diagnosed and I lived in El Paso, Texas. So imagine a Mexican girl living in the border town, 16 years old. Everything was about food, and everything was about, oh, you're not gonna be able to have tortillas. Oh, you're not gonna be able to have, you name it, like name the food. So I think when we think about diabetes, we automatically think, you can't change this, or it's too much sugar. So it's automatically a very restrictive mentality. And this is just no way to live. So when we only start seeing food as a number, food as this prescriptive thing that we need to do, it could be very dangerous because we lose that flexibility, we lose that nuance and that balance in life. So food is not going to be your enemy. And instead of thinking, I'm no longer going to be able to have this, let's start thinking, what things could we add? What could we do differently that adds into our life? And so for me, I was told that I could no longer have flour tortillas. And I come from the border town of El Paso, Texas. Like, flour tortillas are the most delicious things that you can have. So I was told I couldn't have tortillas, I couldn't have sugar or desserts, and all my desserts were now changed to like sugar-free desserts. And I think that's where a lot of my philosophy Nutrichicos comes from, is you're still going to be able to enjoy foods that you love, but we're just going to be able to, we're going to do it in a different way. And we're going to learn a strategy and approach that works so we're able to bring that joy back. So food is not your enemy. Lesson number 2, perfection is a myth, guys. Let's aim for progress, not perfection. And This is fundamental to Nutrichicos philosophy, but I learned it early on having diabetes. Because for any type 1s out there, you could be eating the same thing every single day. So I could have the same breakfast, the same amount of carbs, I would give the same amount of insulin, and my blood sugars would be totally different. You know how frustrating this is when you eat the same thing and you count the carbs, you even weigh the carbs, you give the same amount of insulin, yet you're gonna have a very different result. It's just extremely frustrating. And then you realize that, oh, it's not all in your control. It's things like hormones, it's things like sleep. You know, if you're in your menses, if you're menstruating, if you're gonna be more stressed, all of those factors, if you're hydrated, if you're in the heat, if the food has fat or doesn't have fat or more protein, like there's so many factors that come into play in my blood sugars. That is not just about food or insulin. Having that flexibility and that ability to say, oh, it's never gonna be perfect. Like we could just do our best. So I think for my parents out there, especially if you're newly diagnosed, we get hyper focused on a number. And if it goes above 200, a lot of my parents would be like, oh my God. And so realizing that I don't want you just to focus on that specific number, but I want you to have a more objective overview and see what's the pattern? What is that we're not doing because consistently this is what's happening? Because again, you can't focus on every single number. Otherwise, you're gonna drive yourself crazy. Focus on the pattern and focus on what you can control. Diabetes is never gonna be perfect. Blood sugars are never gonna be perfect. We're gonna focus on progress, never perfection. Lesson number 3, I learned it's about balance. And healthy eating is never gonna be one thing or the other. It's never gonna be this or that. And I always say balance is learned. It's not gonna be measured. And that balance in life is something that I've had to learn, unfortunately, over the years, because I realized there's so many things in my diabetes that I couldn't control. And oftentimes when we think about food in kids with type 1, we think of, oh, the diabetic diet or diabetic foods or even kid foods, right? There's no such thing as this is the one food for your diabetes or this is a diabetic diet. I mean, that doesn't exist. The foods that I want your kids or any person with diabetes eating is going to be the same things that I want any other healthy person eating. Fruits, veggies, legumes, variety, and also including foods that bring you joy. So I think this is a real lesson in balance and flexibility over just perfection, because we can be eating very healthy, and health is not just going to be eating of cauliflower tortillas and only veggies, right? So there's many ways of being healthy. And for me, health also involves emotional health. And that needs to include also the foods that you love. So realize healthy eating is never one thing or the other. It's usually a mix of both, and it's a lot more nuanced. Lesson number 4. Food is meant to be enjoyed. Enjoy the freaking chocolate. Enjoy the ice cream, because life is too short not to. And I learned this because when I was diagnosed, I realized that life is too fragile and life is a gift, and we don't know if we're gonna be here tomorrow. And so once I was diagnosed, I had a deeper realization that I'm only gonna be in this earth for X amount of time, that I think that I wouldn't have had if I didn't have any chronic condition. So I think I understand my fragility, and I'm much more aware of it. And that's why I really strive to be in this earth with a purpose. And I have a time clock, and I want to make sure that I'm enjoying it, because just like with diabetes, there could be anything that life comes in the way. And so I'm very present of that. And I think that's partly fueling my philosophy of finding food that is also meant to be enjoyed. That doesn't mean we're gonna, go crazy and overindulge. No, but finding those small pleasures in life without the guilt. So I think for me is the joy and the finding that is really important, because especially we come from this narrative that we can't have anything. And oh my God, you're not supposed to enjoy it. It's supposed to be terrible and supposed to be like carb free, and you can't have bread and you can't have sugar. I'm like, really? Like, watch me have a dark chocolate every single day, and watch me have a flour tortilla, and watch me have great blood sugars in spite of everything. So I think that was part of my rebellion, to say, oh, watch me. Let me show you how I can. And my biggest pride is being able to show other families on how they're able to enjoy their favorite foods, which oftentimes can be more problematic because we need to understand digestion patterns, give more insulin, or how fat and protein are going to be affecting blood sugars. So it's complex, but that doesn't mean we cannot do it. So for me, food is meant to be enjoyed, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to have done this for so long if I didn't like the food. And the reason people succeed in whatever diet they follow is because they're actually able to follow it. So the idea that I'm going to be able to eat a food that I don't like just because it's healthy for me is never going to work. It might work temporarily, and that's why diets don't work. Because if at the end of the day I'm not enjoying it, it will not work long time. And so for me, it's also finding ways where we can integrate joy and even start recreating different moments, different associations of, oh, veggies can be very joyful, and I'm really enjoying different fruits and different salads, and maybe food that I maybe never would have eaten, but because of this, I'm finding ways of adding nutrition and finding joy. So realize that food is going to be a lot more than just the carbohydrates and the calcium and the iron, especially for kids with diabetes. The relationship with food becomes very complex, and finding ways where we can include that spontaneity and that joy, even though it's going to be more challenging, and even though we're going to have to think a lot more, that will be important. And thankfully, technology has definitely come a long way. But still, I will say it's sometimes hard to be able to enjoy that pizza and have, not extremely high blood sugars. The more you restrict, the more power food has. And I've learned this the hard way. I've told this story before, that initially when I was diagnosed, my family was amazing. I mean, my family was great. But all of pretty much dessert got changed to like a sugar-free dessert, and sugar kind of became off limits. And so I never used to have dessert after a meal. That was just never something that we had as a family. But because I was diagnosed, then my family started to incorporate more sugar-free desserts, because pobrecita, no puede tener azúcar, poor girl, she can't have sugar. So all of a sudden, I became obsessed with like the dessert, and where's my dessert? When before, that's not anything that I would really think about. And so this mentality of scarcity, right, of limiting, of prohibiting, with all the best intentions, right, tends to backfire. This approach I use in my kids that don't have diabetes, because we see the same thing. When we start prohibiting something so badly, it backfires. And I learned this because I live with type 1, and because I see so many families who have a medical reason to do it, yet we see the same effect. More temptation, more desire to have that food. So instead, let's see how can we model balance, and how can we model, more inclusivity and not as much fear. That's why the language that we use at home is going to be very important, because so at the end of the day, the goal for kids that have or don't have diabetes is to be able to self-regulate and to see foods as, different variety that gives us different things and not be overly obsessed with one. And yes, that's hard to do, but it's even harder if you have type 1 diabetes because we're so taught to limit. So my challenge to you is, how can we start adapting a different narrative, a different perspective, a perspective of abundance instead of restriction? And lastly, my biggest lesson that I've learned in my 25 years with diabetes is that food is family. And I always say it, especially with my kiddos that are newly diagnosed, or every time that I counsel families with or without diabetes. Family is 90% of what will dictate success, and how kids will learn about food and will learn on how to manage their own condition. And I saw this in the many families that I counseled, but I saw it in my own family. And I give so much credit to my beautiful family, because the way they treated me around diabetes is, I didn't just have diabetes, but my mom had diabetes, my dad had diabetes, and my sisters, all of a sudden, all of us had diabetes. They didn't tell me these words, but I saw it. I saw it in the food that we had. So we started changing the type of food, not with a lot of explanation, but all of a sudden we all ate the same dessert and we all had the same foods. And if instead we were having, 5 tortillas, now we had less. So I started seeing these changes across the board. And maybe I started seeing or not seeing some of the snacks that we used to have at home. And I think my sisters weren't that happy, but that was just the way it was. So I think the idea that food is not an individual sport, right? Eating is not an individual sport. We eat as a family. We're social beings. Eating is a family event. And so we need to treat it as that way. And the same goes for kids who are larger in size, thinner in size. We kind of need to model and mimic those same eating behaviors, eating habits. So kids learn from watching us. They're going to learn more from watching us than what we say. They usually don't really pay attention. They don't listen. Obey, they watch. They definitely watch what you do. So realizing that it's really going to be up to parents to model those healthy behaviors at home, and to see food as not just about the carbs or the insulin or the calcium or the protein or the carbs. It is so much more. And one of my favorite sayings, even in Nutrichicos, is, whatever we learn with joy, we never forget. So that is my challenge to you, is to find ways that we could add more joy. And diabetes didn't just teach me about insulin. It taught me so much more. It taught me on how to be resilient, on how to have empathy and compassion for myself when days that I was just not having it, or was having a really bad blood sugar week, and there was no such thing as perfect numbers, even though I tried my best. And really what it means to be true to who you are, and to find purpose and to find meaning. So for me, diabetes has definitely taught me a lot, more than I ever would have thought. So maybe this is your source of inspiration of, when you have lemons, we're gonna make lemonade and we're gonna surprise everybody. So if I've learned anything in these 25 years of counting carbs, giving insulin, it is this: health is never linear. It is never about perfection. It's about finding that balance. It is about finding that joy and that connection, and also being kind to yourself, because it's never linear. And so with that, I hope you like this very personal episode and you share it with somebody that is a diabetes warrior, because trust me, we're silent little warriors. You might think we have it all under control, but we do a lot of effort. But before I let you go, it is time for the Messy Bites Real Life Challenge. So even though this was a different type of episode of my lessons learned, I challenge you this week to maybe take take one of these lessons and put it into practice. So maybe it's letting go of this health is all or nothing. Maybe it's letting go of the guilt or the fear that you have around food and just enjoying some chocolate with your kids and allowing them for you to see that you enjoy it. Whatever it is, let's focus on progress, never perfection, and finding some ways that we could include more balance, more joy, and more connection. I hope this episode brought you lots of inspiration. So this World Diabetes Day, I'm not celebrating perfect blood sugars. I am celebrating 25 years of growth, of resilience, of saying yes even though I'm scared and I feel that I'm not ready, and 25 years of learning to forgive myself and have empathy and compassion and realize that there's no such thing as perfect anything. So we do our best, but above all, trying to find things that give me purpose and give me joy and changing the narrative in how we're raising a new generation of kids, which is Messy Bites and Nutrichicos. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this very special episode. I hope you like it. Make sure you're subscribing. If you're liking this, leave me a comment. And of course, send this to a fellow type 1 warrior because they're amazing. They're the real heroes of today. Let them know that you love them by sending this and saying, I'm thinking of you. Until next time, see you later.